Welcome to Layer the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, another in my series of what I call Milestone Moments. These are moments in a band's career where everything seems to come together. Maybe it's an album that features some of their most popular songs. Maybe it's even the debut album from the band. So, the band that I've picked for today is Emerson, Lake and Palmer and their self-titled album. Now, this album came out in 1970 in the UK and in early 1971 in the US. And in some ways, this was a supergroup of sorts. It featured Keith Emerson on organ and piano, who had come from the successful band The Nice, Greg Lake on vocals, bass, and guitar, who had come from King Crimson and had played on King Crimson's album In the Court of the Crimson King, which is an album that I will be featuring at some point because it's an album that I love. Carl Palmer on drums, who had come from Atomic Rooster and the crazy world of Arthur Brown. Emerson, Lake and Palmer is a very interesting group to me. When I think of progressive rock, I sort of break a lot of the more well-known groups down into different categories. For instance, when I think of Pink Floyd in the realm of progressive rock, I think of them more like the artsy side of the atmospheric and artsy side of progressive rock. When I think of Yes and Rush, I think of more the hard rock side of progressive rock. When I think of ELP, I think of more along the lines of the avant-garde experimental side of progressive rock. Much like King Crimson, I put King Crimson in that same category too, experimenting with sounds and rhythms and arrangements. I think what ELP brings to the table is Keith Emerson has this classical influence that goes through a lot of the songs. You have sort of the melodic nature of Greg Lake in his vocal approach, and Carl Palmer to me has a really jazzy style. So when you put all this together, you get sort of this classical avant-garde, but still at times melodic elements to a lot of their music. So this album was produced by Greg Lake, and it was engineered by Eddie Oford, who had also would do some work with engineering work with Yes. The album sounds, I think it sounds great. It's a great sounding 70s rock album. All the instruments are there. It's got a nice warm sound. It's not overly bright or overly muddy. It just sits in a really nice spot, very open. I listened a lot to the vinyl. I also listened on Amazon Music HD. The version on there was a high-res version, so it was 24-bit. I think it was 44 kilohertz. It didn't say it was a reissue or remaster or anything. There were no bonus tracks, and that sounded really good also. So I'm not sure what version that is, but the CD version that I was streaming through Amazon also sounded really good. So the album starts with a song, The Barbarian, and this is the heaviest song on the album. This is just a heavy progressive rock song in general. It's an instrumental, has this cool like distorted bass. He does like these big bends, and then there's the big organ kind of playing on like the offbeats, playing off of that heavy riff from the bass, the organ taking over some of the riffing too. Just a great, maybe like what you would hear from Deep Purple or Uriah Heep, that kind of heavy style organ sound. There's a tempo change then, and this is all over this record. Again, ELP for me just combines the progressive elements with the time signatures, all these crazy changes, lots of chord changes, But then there's also this sort of avant-garde jazz feel to a lot of the things they do. And this is one of them where it goes into this tempo change that really reminds me of Dave Brubeck. Dave Brubeck is a famous jazz piano player, and he was a guy that experimented a lot with rhythms and odd meters and odd accents. And this sort of has that like dee doo dee doo dee doo, that kind of like feel to it here, and the tempo that it changes to, and where the accents are. Then there's this big gong hit, and it goes back into that distorted bass riff. So this is probably my favorite song on the album, because it's the heaviest song. I'm a guy that likes heavy stuff, and I love the changes in it. Next, Take a Pebble. It's a mellow, kind of trippy one. This one's got vocals on it, and Greg Lake's vocals. I would describe him as he's got sort of an upper mid-range kind of voice. He's definitely not a shouty singer. He doesn't have a super high voice, but he's got sort of a nice kind of mellow voice, and that's kind of what I hear in this one. He's just singing in a really kind of laid back, mellow style. I like that Keith Emerson, it sounds like he's playing like a grand piano, and he's raking something across the strings on the inside of the piano, so it has this like sound to the chords and what he's doing. So just really cool. Then it breaks into this classical jazz style section with Carl Palmer playing on brushes. Brushes are, when you're playing a drum set, instead of using a regular drumstick, you're using these things that are brushes. So it gives it sort of a swishy type of sound. It's very common in jazz. It's something you almost never hear in a rock setting. And when I was listening to this, I was trying to think of another example of in a rock setting where somebody uses brushes, and off the top of my head I couldn't. So this is really cool. Again, it's sort of showing his Carl Palmer's jazz influence and what I think he brings to the sound. Then it drops down and it gets really quiet, and there's sort of this lone by itself acoustic guitar that eventually builds up into like this countryish feel where there's like hand clapping and everything, which I think is great. I mean, we're only not even a quarter into the record here, and we've touched on so many different feels. We've got heavy rock, jazz, classical. It's just like ELP was this band that could just move between all these things, and all within the space of one song. It's just great. Then there's this Freeform Jazz section. Again, the sort of experimental, just sounds like they're just sort of this open-ended jamming kind of thing. And then they go back in to the last verse. And if I remember correctly, there's like even some like timpani hits and everything from the drums in the last verse. Next, Knife Edge, which is probably the most straightforward song on the record, compared to everything else that's been going on here. It's probably the second heaviest song too on here. It's got this nice kind of bass in the verse. It sort of drops down, and the bass is just playing this, playing the main riff, and then it goes into some different kind of rocking changes. There's a video of them making a TV appearance playing this particular number. Next, The Three Fates, broken up into three different sections, right? Nothing screams progressive rock more than when you've got Roman numerals and different sections to one song. So you've got Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos. I'm sure I am horribly mispronouncing those names, but this starts off with a really massive church organ sound, and apparently it is the organ from the Royal Festival Hall. And man, it just sounds like they put a microphone in the middle of the church, and he just, nothing sounds as big as a church organ, man. It just sounds great. Then it fades off into this classical piano thing, and it goes back into the church organ, then into this avant-garde 7/8 fusion jam. 7/8 is a time signature that's an odd time signature, so it has this sort of like odd feel to it, but they just sort of jam out and are just all over it. Really, really great. Next, Tank, which is a drum showcase really for Carl Palmer. It does start off with the whole band, and there's this sort of, to me, it makes me think of Frank Zappa, like a melody where with a clavinet playing the melody line. Then it goes into this big long drum solo, and at the end of the drum solo, I like it because they start putting like effects on the drums, and there's even this effect that sounds like Peter Criss's drum solo on Kiss Alive 1, like this phaser effect, and I wonder if that influenced him because it has that same effect. It's like sound as he's going around the drums, and there's like even like sounds like an electronic like drum sounds even mixed in there. Then the band comes back in and they finish it all out, and then the album ends with probably their most recognizable song, maybe. It's got to be up there. You hear this a lot on classic rock radio. Lucky Man, which is a rock ballad, acoustic guitar, Greg Lake, catchy chorus. And the thing I think a lot of people remember with this song is at the end of the song, it's just like the drums sort of playing this sort of groovy beat while the Moog synthesizer just plays these like long sort of freeform lines, woo things. And I mean, nothing screams 70s prog for me more than a Moog synthesizer. So it's kind of cool. Again, like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, man, ELP, they touch on so many different things. You have Lucky Man here, which is like a melodic rock ballad, and you have all this other experimental avant-garde jazz-like things and classical things. I often wonder how many people heard Lucky Man on the radio and bought this expecting the whole album to be like this sort of acoustic guitar rock ballad, Neil Youngish type stuff. And then they heard all this other crazy experimental stuff and were just like, whoa, but hey, maybe it turned on a lot of people to progressive rock and opened their ears up to some different things. All right, so I could have picked, really it was hard for me to pick a milestone moment from ELP because at first I was going to go with Brain Salad Surgery, and Brain Salad Surgery does land at the top of a lot of people's lists for their best album. But, and it does have the Carnival number 9, which is Welcome to the Show, let it go, let it go. As that song, which gets played a lot on the radio. But for me, I'll just be honest with you, I just like this album a little bit better. And for me, it's a little bit more focused. I don't know, I just like it better. I like Brain Salad Surgery. I like Tarkus. Also, Trilogy is good. I like where ELP went on with Pictures at an Exhibition and all the different things they experimented with. So I had to pick one. I thought this has Lucky Man on it, a very, very big popular song. It was their first album after coming out of all these other groups. So I went with this one. So there you go, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. It's got the cool cover here with the bird on it. I'd never realized this. I was reading about this, that I guess this was supposed to be for Spirit, this album cover, the band Spirit, and this is the guy's head from Spirit that you can see here. I don't know if that's actually true or not. You see the other side of the thing here, but yeah, a really cool progressive rock album. So let me know what you think of this record in the comments down below. Like I said, I could have picked a couple other ELP songs from Milestone Moments, so I probably will talk about them at some other point because I really do like Brain Salad Surgery and Tarkus. So, all right, let me know what you think of this record in the comments. Make sure you hit like and subscribe, and until we see you again, make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.